Boa tarde, boa noite, boa madrugada, aonde você estiver. Eu sou o THIAGO TICCHETTI. Sejam bem-vindos sempre ao canal Desvendando Mistérios. Olá, pessoal. Primeira entrevista de 2022 aqui no canal. Essa entrevista foi feita em 2021, no ano passado, mas é muito atual. Nosso entrevistado é o ativista ufológico norte-americano Stephen Bassett. Vamos conversar sobre a Abertura Ufológica. Em 2013, Stephen conseguiu reunir dezenas de testemunhas entre militares, pessoas do governo e ufólogos para falar abertamente sobre o fenômeno ufológico no Clube de Imprensa em Washington, nos Estados Unidos. A repercussão foi enorme. Então vem comigo nessa entrevista inédita e exclusiva que você só encontra aqui no canal Desvendando Mistérios. Hi Steve, thank you very much for being here in my YouTube channel, and I'm sure the Brazilian audience, listeners, are gonna love it, this interview. Thank you very much for your time again.
It's my pleasure. I think you probably know that I've actually spoken in Brazil twice, and the second time, 5 cities, 5 or 6 cities. So I've been to Brazil, and it was great. I had a good time, and so now it's nice to talk with some of my supporters down there.
Yeah, and we love it because it was in a UFO summit in 2018. I think it was 2018 because we don't have 2019.
Well, the last time, the one I spoke to 5 cities, that was 2019.
19, yeah, in 5 cities, yeah. You were not, we was not here. You're not here in Brasilia, but I think we went to Curitiba, São Paulo, Porto Alegre. I don't know. 5 cities, yeah, 5 cities. I know that because AJ was organizing this summit. So it was amazing, and the Brazilian audience love it because they really like what you share, what you work. They really love it. And well, this is my channel. I always start with the same question for all my guests, and this first question is: what led you to the UFO research, or to bring documents abroad?
I'm not a researcher. I'm an activist. And I got into this field because the issue is so important. It has huge implications for the human race, certainly. Well, not certainly, yeah. Has huge implications for the United States. I'm really an anti-war activist, to be honest with you. And this is the way that I've decided to approach that. And I did this in 1995 because I needed to do something with my life. And prior to that, frankly, nothing I was doing was particularly interesting. Just, you know how it is? I mean, for most people, you go to day to day, and you try to pay the bills and the rent, and not cause trouble. I was totally bored with that. So I decided to get into this and cause a little trouble. That's what activists do. Good trouble and just trouble. Trouble is when you just pressure the government or the authorities to do the right thing. Good trouble is when you commit disobedience, civil disobedience, in order to get them to try to do the right thing. I've never had to do that, but I have definitely been a pain in the butt to a number of people in the ruling class.
But what ringed the bell to bring you to the ufology? Was a case? Was some? Well, the government is lying.
Yeah, some people it's a big deal. I mean, it's not, Art Bell is a classic example. Art Bell, the legendary radio host, who switched to this topic in the 60s. I mean, the 90s. Because it was really getting to be pretty popular, and it was making money, and the show was doing great. But he really didn't think the ET issue was much. He didn't think that UFOs were anything significant. And then one night, he and his wife were out. I think they'd just taken a trip to get away from it all, and that they were out in one of these kind of desert areas, kind of places where you go camp out. And they were out that evening just kind of relaxing and taking it easy, and a giant black triangle flew low over their head. And I don't mean fast, slow, right? And boom, Art got it instantly. He realized, holy mackerel, this is all real. So no, that wasn't the case with me. I had been aware of the issue since I was a teenager. I had been watched, or read rather, a number of articles that would appear up. That the media had been covering it forever. They've always covered it. And it was clear to me that the articles were showing that this is a non-human extraterrestrial presence. I mean, it was obvious. This is not a hard thing to get, right? And if you can come to just the basic information without any bias, and having not been influenced by the fact that the government has been working assiduously for 75 years to tell you there's nothing to see here. I guess I've always been a somewhat kind of the person that if the government says this, I don't immediately accept it. I know the history of the 20th century. Governments will lie all the time. That doesn't mean they always lie, but it just means you need to be careful. I wasn't believing the government statement, and the coverage, which was fairly straightforward back then, was clear. We didn't have that kind of technology, therefore it came from somewhere else. So I knew that, but so what? I'm a young guy. I gotta live my life, but I just filed it away. And over the years, I would see this and that, this and that, this and that, this and that. Read some books, but I never signed up. I never joined an organization like MUFON or anything like that. I just didn't get directly involved. But in 1995, I was at a position in my life where I needed to do something. I needed to change directions, very much so. And I needed to choose well. And I don't mean, find another job. I mean, choose something that I could do that had importance and meant something. In other words, something very activist. And I chose this. I looked at it and said, this is happening. Get involved. And I was able to get lucky and get a nice start, because I was able to volunteer for John Mack's operation. And so that gave me 4 months with John Mack's operation in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which was real cool. I mean, I'm meeting contactees, and I'm there with some people that are really doing the work, and it was very exciting. It wasn't a place I could stay at. I didn't fit that well. But I had a long background, or a long time that I spent in Washington, D.C. I knew Washington very well. My family's lived in the area since the early 1900s. I had a place to stay, and I calculated that, okay, what I need to do, I just figured it out. I need to engage the politics of this issue, because it's a political issue. It's not a science issue by and large. It's about politics right now. That's what it's been about. I knew I could live in Washington. I knew the area. I knew that I could register as a lobbyist, and I went and registered. And I knew that once I did, I'd get attention, because no one had ever done it on this issue. And the Washington Post came out, gave me a large interview, put it in the Washington Post paper, front page of the business section, which is damn near as good as front page of the paper itself. And suddenly, I'm a player. That's how it works. And then suddenly I'm able to get some interviews and what have you. And the next thing you know, I'm on Art Bell's show, and off we go. That was 25 years ago.
That was amazing. And you are the executive director of the Paradigm Research Group.
That's what I set up to lobby under. It as a sole proprietor. It's a DBA. I didn't go nonprofit. Not that I operate like a for profit. I really don't. But tell us about this, the PRG. Yeah, well, Paradigm Research Group is the DBA, and I created that name because the way I started the field was to register as a lobbyist. And I decided to register as under Paradigm Research Group, which you can do. And the reason I called it that is that I contacted a number of research organizations and said, would you like a free lobbyist? I'll register you under my registration. In other words, I'll register you as a client. I'm not going to charge you anything. Well, that was an easy deal to accept, and they did. So there's a number of entities that I registered as clients. Again, this is, I don't have any money. They're not paying me anything, but this is basically a statement that I was sending to the government and to the media. This issue is actually pretty important. It should have lobbyists. Everything else does. I think cats and dogs have lobbyists in Washington working on their behalf. And that and so that's why I called it Paradigm Research Group, right? But I'm not a research organization. And so it was a message. This is important. This is real, and it should have a lobbyist, and here I am. And so that is the nature of Paradigm Research Group. It's been, and the reason that I did not try to go nonprofit is I knew how controversial the issue was. I knew how the government has been dealing with it. And I was aware that if you're a nonprofit and the government wants to take you down, it's very easy. They just pull you into court under some very favorable judge and state, you haven't been following the nonprofit rules. The judge pulls down slams down a verdict. Yeah, you violated the rules. So all the money that you've raised for years, you have to give it back, or you have to pay taxes on it. So in other words, you are absolutely vulnerable at any time to being shut down by the government. Now, I didn't know how tough this was going to be. It really wasn't as tough as I expected, really, but I had no idea. So I set up as a nonprofit sole proprietor. It gives me the maximum flexibility under the Constitution and First Amendment rights. I probably should have converted to a nonprofit a while back. I didn't. I'm about to. The timing now is very good for that. So I'm about to convert Paradigm Research Group into a full nonprofit with a board of directors and all of that, in order to raise funds for what is coming. And what is coming, of course, is the show. The big show is about to begin.
Well, let's start talking about the beginning of the release of UFO documents. Is it true that other countries were impatient with U.S. cover-up, and this resulted in a UFO opening disclosure of some of this country, like France, in the beginning of the 2000s?
Mm-hmm. Let me gently suggest that you consider using the term UAP and not UFO.
Okay.
UAP means exactly the same thing as UFO. So why? Because UFO was the acronym that the government chose to focus much of the propaganda and ridicule on the subject. In other words, if you're going to ridicule a subject, and you're going to ridicule people involved in a subject, you have to find something that you can focus that ridicule on that is common to those people and what they're doing. And UFO emerged very early, and the government, I think it was actually a government person that came up with the term early, as connected to that phenomena back in the 40s. And so as the government started to undermine it and put that out there, it was UFOs is silly. UFOs is no, there's nothing there. UFOs are not real. UFO. And over years, that became in other words, the trigger, right? This happens, the governments have done this for thousands of years, okay? They'll do it to whole groups of people by associating a term to those people. And then every time they mention that term, people are triggered, meaning, oh, you mean those people. And that's what UFO became. It became the core to the ridicule process. If the moment you say UFO, you're part of the UFO ghetto. that we created, and therefore you will be treated accordingly. UAP is a new term because it's not UFO. I've done my share to try to make that happen. It wasn't easy because by the time I entered the field in '96, the term had been in play for almost 50 years. Okay, so it was well established. But ultimately, we've prevailed. UAP is now the term for this phenomena, even though it means exactly the same thing, but UAP does not have the stigma. And getting away from the stigma is critical. Okay, so it's UAP. And what was the other thing you said? And yes, the whole world is impatient regarding this subject. The whole world has known. I say the whole world. In other words, there are very substantial numbers of people, as much as 50%, in every country on this planet that is aware that this phenomena is not only real, it has to be real. That's a non sequitur, to tautology, really. It's like saying you see something in the sky and you're going, is it real or is it not real? What do you mean? Is it a hologram, or are you having a delusion in your brain? Well, of course it's real. You just can't fully identify it. So that's another way they ridicule the subject. Are they real or not? Well, if they're not real, that makes you insane. No. So the 50% in many nations, in most nations, probably 40% of the entire world population, what's that, about 2.9 billion people, know that this phenomena is not only important, but non-human. And the embargo is in its 75th year, and they're just tired of it. They come to understand how important it would be if we could get the truth of this out and what it might mean for us. And so, yeah, the whole world has lost patience with this. And the United States has been the leader of this truth embargo. It's our embargo. We created the embargo and got our allies to go along with our embargo, just like we got our allies to go along with our embargo of Cuba, because it put some missiles, some Russian missiles there, and that was probably a mistake. And then they got sent back to the Soviet Union, and we decided, well, we're going to punish you. And so they've been embargoing Cuba since 1960s, which has done nothing but help the communist-leaning junta stay in power, and the Cuban people suffer. One of the things about being a political activist is you tend to learn sooner than others how unbelievably stupid the policies of nations can be. Now, we like to talk about the stupidity of other nations' policies, but we're not really supposed to talk about the stupidity of American policies. But let me tell you, the United States is capable of doing stupidity as well as any country in the world. And we have done some grotesquely stupid things in my lifetime, which has done enormous damage, killed tons of people. That's a little, I'm digressing here, but again, that was an embargo of Cuba that's done damage. And we got our allies to go along with it. The embargo of the reality of extraterrestrials will be seen by history as doing even more damage, though in a somewhat different way, than embargoes like the things we do with Cuba. And because we can't sanction the aliens, right? You're going to sanction those extraterrestrials so they'll leave us alone, I don't know. We're not going to let them go to Disneyland, or we're not going to let them, I don't know. We're not going to buy their inventory of product. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's all nonsense. The world is
we're not give them iPhones. We're not give them the iPhones.
Yeah, they can't have iPhones. So I mean, it's all ridiculous. It has been ridiculous for a long time. Now, look, let's face it. Ridiculous is how governments tend to roll. And so if you're saying stop being ridiculous, they're going to say, well, we don't know how to not be ridiculous. So I mean, I'm sorry, we can't help you. All right, look, what the activist does is point out how ridiculous a policy is, how unjust a policy is, how destructive a policy is. and hope to get authority to do the right thing. That's my job, trying to show people just how much damage this embargo has caused, how much it's damaged our politics, our body politic, our the trust in government, what we may have lost by not having access to technologies which have developed in the secret world related to this that are simply not available, and on and on and on, and just how embargoing truth in general, which is not good for relationships between husbands and wives, I can assure you, it's also not good relationships between governments and their people. So that's my job. That's what I do.
And in 2013, you did something that was amazing, just out of the blue, just Jim Fox says. And you organized a citizen hearing on disclosure at the National Press Club in Washington. How was organizing this event, and what is the repercussion among the U.S. politicians with this event?
The citizen hearing and disclosure was certainly the most significant thing I have done in my career on this. I almost surpassed it, but didn't quite work out. The National Press Club, to which I belong and have been either belonged or been interacting with going all the way back to the 60s. 60s? Early 70s. It's 2 blocks from the White House. It's in the National Press Building, which back in the day was kind of run down. The whole thing was filled with journalists, and journalists are not big on decor or cleaning the carpets. Now it's been renovated, and it's absolutely fantastic. The building is just superb. And it's held dozens of press conferences on this issue. No other press entity in the world has held more press conferences on this subject than the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., to its great, great credit. All right, meaning, hey, press conference regarding ET issue, no problem with us. Go for it. So one of the events that I held there was a big one. About 700,000, 750, something like that was spent to hold a 5-day, 30-hour mock congressional hearing before 6 former members of Congress, which were paid an appropriate amount of money to spend 10 hours a day taking this testimony. I mean, they worked really hard. 3 men, 3 women, 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and a Libertarian. It was a very representative panel. And it was a powerful event. It was streamed live so that thousands of people, including members of Congress or journalists who just didn't quite have the, how would you say, the backbone to head on down and be seen there, right? They could watch it from the safety of their office. To show what hearings would look like, because hearings are essential to ending the truth embargo. The way to disclosure, which is the end of the truth embargo via announcement from the president, is going to have to go through hearings to be done properly. And we could never get them. The last time there was a hearing was 1968, lasted a day. It was of 0 consequence. 66, there was one hearing, lasted a day, no consequence. Since then, any effort to get hearings, that's 53 years, has been completely blocked. Why? Because the managers of the truth embargo well know that if we had the appropriate hearings, the embargo would collapse. Okay, so my contribution was, let's show them what they would be like. We brought in 42 witnesses. How many countries were represented? 10. And they presented, well, I mean, just tremendous presentations and Q&A with these members of Congress. So that was in April, May of 2013. Then the plan was to take the record of that hearing, deliver it to every member of Congress, and with that as a platform, start putting as much pressure as possible on the leading candidate to be president Secretary Hillary Clinton. So the citizen hearing ends in May of 2013. And because of the way we do our elections here, you start campaigning about 2 years before the vote, and you spend $1 billion to try to become president. I don't know why we do it this way. It's ridiculous. It's wasteful. It's boring. And it's undermining the ability for the people to participate, because everybody's campaigning all the time. And also the way we've structured the campaign laws recently, they all have to raise an unbelievable amount of money. I mean, typically what they call a presidential year election in this country, counting all offices running, cost about $4 billion. And when the election's over and the $4 billion, which has been contributed by well-meaning people, I guess, do we get $4 billion better government? No, we don't. It's asinine. It's ridiculous. It all has to be fixed. Anyway, I knew that her campaign for president would start in early 2015, right? So finished up in 13, and by the time that campaign was ready, we were ready to deliver the citizen hearing on disclosure record, 30-hour DVD set to every member of Congress. And then I launched a media campaign to force her from cover on this, it's an idiot, to put pressure on her to speak to the issue. And I succeeded. I generated, along with my publicist, a huge number of articles, 400 or so, forcing her to make statements, give interviews, and a lot of other things, limited, but not trivial. And not only that, but her campaign manager, John Podesta, her husband, President Clinton, and so forth. Thus, bringing the issue completely into her campaign in a way that's never been done before, which would have made it almost impossible for her to escape the issue if she wanted to once she was in the White House. However, everybody thought she was going to win. I mean, so it was a slam dunk. So the citizen hearing on disclosure, the media campaign to get her connected to the issue, she goes into the White House, boom. She takes action, the hearings take place, and we get disclosure in 2017. That was the plan. It was a good plan. But you want to know how to make God laugh? It's a phrase. I don't know if you have the similar phrase in Brazil, but if you want to make God laugh, tell her your plans, right? It didn't work out.
We don't have this expression here. We something like that is, if you want to laugh, make me laugh. Okay.
Well, but Brazil is Catholic nation, so I think you should start that phrase. If you want to make the Lord laugh, tell him all your plans, right? So she lost, and history was dramatically changed, I assure you. The law, I don't give a damn what someone thinks about her or what they think about the man who won. That doesn't matter. The point is that history dramatically changed because of that election. That was not like, oh, well, didn't get that person, we got this person. No. And so the last 4 years has been very interesting. And as of the election in 2016, I had no idea what to expect. I had no idea where this was going to go. And I'd been at it at that point, 2016, for 20 years. I actually left the country. I just went to the UK, and I stayed there for 7-8 months. I just didn't know what to do, and it was just a nice place to go, and I had a place to stay, and was able to do a few things there. Some good came from it, but later I realized I wish I hadn't left, because something was about to happen, something big, but I had no idea. I didn't know. So that's what was taking place with the citizen hearing on disclosure. Then I did the election campaign initiative to get Clinton to engage that issue. Turns not that she didn't want to. I mean, Clinton was going to disclose, and a lot of people knew it. it was not that hard to figure out if you knew the history. She was going to disclose. She was probably going to say, look, tell the Democratic committee chairs, look, I want hearings. I want you to start bringing witnesses and hold hearings. Then put pressure on the DOD to cooperate, and bingo. Once you have those hearings, you get disclosure. And she would have been the disclosure president and gone down in history. It's one of the most important presidents or leaders of any nation ever. And I knew that, and a lot of other people knew that. So it wasn't that hard, I think, to get them to do something. But I think her intention, and John Podesta's intention, was like, yeah, okay, we're going to go for the documents. We're going to end this embargo, but we don't really want to talk about it during the campaign because we're worried that if we do, we'll lose votes. What can I say?
But they think that this disclosure or embargo, what the difference between the both? But do you think that if Hillary Clinton won the election, she became a president, do you think that she gonna disclosure things from the past, from, let's say, from the 40s, since the 2016?
I know we need to clarify some language here. The truth embargo is the formal legal policy for national security reasons under the 1947 National Securities Act of the United States government to deny the reality of this extraterrestrial presence, undermine efforts to confirm the reality of the ET presence by the civilians, minimize journalistic coverage, and so forth. That's the truth embargo. It's still in place 75 years since it began essentially at Roswell in July 1947. Disclosure, and by the way, that is a term I came up with. That is a term that I introduced back in the early aughts to replace UFO cover-up, because UFO cover-up, it's a bogus term, and it serves the truth embargo. Because every time somebody in the field mentions UFO cover-up, they're basically saying the national security people are criminals. They're covering up their crimes. That's not how you make friends. That's not how you influence people. If they're really committing crimes, and you can say that, but they're not committing crimes by maintaining the embargo. So I said, so that's a term that I introduced. Disclosure, the basic use of the term, small d, was put into play by Stephen Greer in the late 80s, early 1990s, part of the Disclosure Project and so forth. He's referring there to the project to disclose to the people the truth, get the information out. No problem. I introduced a different concept, disclosure with a capital D, not disclosure with a small d. Disclosure with a capital D refers specifically to an event, all right? And such as the 4th of July is an event we have in this country. We have it every year on the 4th of July. Okay. So disclosure with a capital D is an event. What is it? What is the event that it refers to? It refers to the day that the head of state of at least one nation, and it almost certainly one of the major powers, most certainly, confirms publicly to the citizens of that nation that that phenomena is not human. Extraterrestrials are here. Some of the craft are piloted by them or controlled by them. That is disclosure. That day is the disclosure day. It is capital D. It is an event. And I know it has created a lot of confusion. I get it. But having to explain it a lot kind of gives it more attention and so forth. Small d disclosure is the never-ending process of revealing new information about something, including the ET reality. Capital D disclosure is disclosure day. It's the day that it's confirmed by a head of state. And I assure you, every other head of state of any major nation will follow within days. So that's what disclosure refers to in my world, all right? What was the other question? And we talked about that. Then you finished up with something else. What was the last thing?
Yeah, if Hillary Clinton
yes,
did the disclosure, she went back to the past to the nowadays.
Well, that's why I clarified the term. What she intended to do was end the truth embargo by announcing the extraterrestrial presence and being the disclosure president on disclosure day. I actually have a website that supports an idea I came up with called World Disclosure Day, worlddisclosureday.org. It's still up there. I tried to get that going, but UFO Day is well established, and so they want to keep celebrating UFO Day, and World Disclosure Day doesn't get that much attention. But it's up there. And the day that disclosure happens, I set that day at July the 8th. I'm happy to tell you why if you want to know. So I set that day as the day to acknowledge Disclosure Day, to acknowledge the idea. But when disclosure does happen, I will go to that website and change the day from July the 8th to whatever day it is. That's what she was going to do. Now, after the confirmation takes place, meaning I'm the president and that phenomenon is extraterrestrial. Surprise! After that begins the process of learning more, but without the onus of trying to learn it when the government is going to great lengths to prevent you from getting the correct information. That's it's just really tough. You're trying to learn about this, and the government's saying, learn about what? So once disclosure happens, all the barriers fall down to fully engage and investigate this issue on all fronts: civilian, corporate, academic, nonprofit institutions, you name it. Everything's in play. And I assure you it's going to be intense. And in that process, which will take place in the post-disclosure world, which will include many things, including a whole bunch of more hearings. There'll be many, many hearings. It'll go on for weeks and weeks and months, in which the Congress will be calling in people to address this aspect, that aspect, and so forth. None of the people in the UAP research activist community are going to be part of the initial hearings. They're just not going to bring us in. It's all going to be military witnesses. But after the confirmation takes place, I think that they're going to expand the hearings to include civilians and people in our field. Not everybody, but those that they feel comfortable with. I hope I get a chance to testify before Congress. I'm not going to be destroyed if I don't, but I hope so. And so that's the answer to your question. She's going to disclose the ET presence. It's not her, or it's not the president that then reveals the rest of that information so much. That information will come from many, many, many sources. Now, a lot of the information that we will learn post-disclosure we'll learn because it's declassified. In other words, a lot of the stuff's going to be classified before we get it. And it is the case that one person in the country that can classify anything is the president. And so the president may play a significant role in deciding whether that's going to be declassified or not. And therefore will be seen as, okay, the president has announced today that he or she has declassified these files and that program, and it's going to be, we're going to be either doing hearings on, or it's going to be reviewed. And so the people will say, well, the president gave us that. So there'll be some of that. But the information will be coming from many sources. Unclassified information will be coming from many different directions into the public domain. And all I can say is that I don't care how many lifetimes you have ahead of you, reincarnation speaking, you will never see this again. You will never see anything again like what is going to happen once disclosure takes place in this world. It's going to be almost, I can't describe it. I just say that it's going to be unbelievable. Now, people say, what do you mean by that, Steve? You mean it's going to be awful and terrible and people are going to be rioting and everything? No. It's going to be the most extraordinary, intense, exciting, uplifting period in the history of the human race. Unless the ET say, okay, now you've disclosed and we're going to blow you all up. Because, you know, and we were fine until you wouldn't acknowledge us, but now that you've acknowledged us to yourselves, we're blowing the whole thing up, and too bad. Well, and then it won't be so nice. Do I think that's going to happen? Zero chance.
So the only chance is they land in the White House backyard, or here in Brasilia in the Palácio da Alvorada backyard, and say, "Hi, we are here."
No, that's not what's going to happen. That's not what's going to happen. We'll acknowledge their presence to ourselves, to the world, and begin an unfettered, full examination of everything that is in the public domain because of the work of thousands of people for no money under a truth embargo for 70 years. A great deal of it is completely valid. And then also reviewing what governments will be releasing worldwide. We'll be immersed in that for many months, year, 2 years. I mean, but you know, 2 years is probably more than enough for anyone in the world that wants to get up to speed on this to get up to speed. In other words, we're going to have a whole lot of people that are pretty much on top of the whole history of this issue and what the governments have known and so forth, how we've dealt with it. So at this place, it's a standard accepted part of human reality. Now, if I'm the ETs, that's when I engage in what I call open contact, formal contact. That's when I do that, because it's going to be fine. It's going to be no big deal. Nobody's going to be shocked if open contact takes place. Does that mean they're going to land craft on the White House lawn? Of course not. But they will engage governments openly. In other words, they will engage governments. There'll be exchanges of information, and we will be told about it. They may allow themselves to be seen. That's fine. But maybe only on Zoom, not in person. Are they going to visit the White House and hold meetings in the West Wing? I don't know. Probably not. How will they communicate with us? Well, we know they can communicate telepathically, but frankly, communicating telepathically with world leaders is pretty unnerving. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think they'll do that. If you're a world leader or if you're a high-level official, you really don't need somebody's thing in your brain, right? You don't need to be hearing things in your brain. In time, we might very well adjust to that. Contactees do, but the point is, no, you don't do that. Can they convey information in English to us in other media? Probably. They could certainly convey it in writing. So it may be that the information and communication will occur in some fashion in which they are telling the governments, okay, you've acknowledged us. Your people pretty much know we're here. Here are some issues we need to chat about. And then we convey it back to them. And that's provided to us. That in and of itself is formal contact, open contact. And that a lot could happen from that. And that's what I expect to happen. I give it 2 years.
And in 2018, 2019, we had 3 videos that shocked the world. There's what the Go Fast, Gumball, and Nimitz. What was the impact on you? Because all your background, your thought, what's the impact on you? And have you ever expected something like that?
No, not then. In a few words, what was supposed to happen was the To the Stars Academy was supposed to announce shortly after Clinton's election as an effort by people within the military intelligence complex to try to get out in front of the issue in a way representing the military intelligence complex by proxy. meaning doing things that they could not do if they were actually employed by the DOD or the CIA or so forth. But they're no longer employed, they're out, but they have substantial resumes. That was the plan. And then go to the New York Times with the extraordinary information and stories. Those had then been printed in the New York Times, probably before Clinton actually took office on January 20, 2017. That the organization, the To the Stars Academy, would have raised a lot of money, a couple $100 million, because they had a public benefit corporation, and I think they raised about 25 million. And that would have simply made it even easier for Clinton to move forward with disclosure, but would also have put the Pentagon and the military intelligence complex in a much better light, much better position with respect to the public, because the public would have seen that they were trying to help. Because the moment that I saw the website on August 11 that was put out for the To the Stars Academy and saw the people that were involved, I instantly knew that what that was that at that moment, for the first time, and to my somewhat surprise and pleasure, the disclosure process was being led by the military intelligence complex. How about that? By proxy. So this was a huge deal. Okay? That was the plan. When she lost the election, the plan was blown up. And it took 10 months for them to make a decision as to whether to launch or essentially to give up. In other words, let it go. Just don't do it. And it was a good case to be made for not doing it, because that 4 years from January 20th, 2017 to January 20th, 2020 was easily the most chaotic, bizarre, grotesque political period in American history relative to the time. If you go back into the early 1800s, we had some pretty unusual administrations, but the times it was a much rougher time, but they seem unusual retrospectively. But in terms of the modern era, no. Other countries have had episodes like that, and we've watched them from afar. I just never thought we'd have one here. So that's why once the election was over, I said, I don't know where we go from here. But then I didn't know about the TTSA. And so what happened is the To the Stars Academy launched in October of 2017, then delivered as planned major stories to the New York Times, which were published on December the 16th of 2017. And I say, they needed to be major. They couldn't be some simple, basic story. It wasn't going to move the needle. They delivered the stories about the Nimitz event. They delivered gun camera footage, never happened before. They delivered information about the ATIP program, Harry Reid's involvement, Bigelow's involvement, and they delivered witnesses, such as David Fravor. This was nothing like this had ever happened before, and those stories were unprecedented. And once those stories were printed, and it was the combination over a 60-day period of the launch of the To the Stars Academy and the printing of those two stories in the New York Times, essentially sealed the fate of the truth embargo. Its days were countable at that point. It had always been only a matter of time, because the disclosure day was inevitable. It was going to happen. But in terms of knowing you could start counting down the days, that happened at that point. It was sealed. It was only a matter of time. Okay, and that's December of 2017. I was not surprised that the truth embargo continued through 17, 18, 19, and 20. because the political situation did not get better, it got progressively worse. And so if you're trying to effectuate an act as profound as ending the truth embargo and confirming the presence of extraterrestrials, which involves the Congress and the military intelligence complex and the White House and all of this, the idea that you can do it with a hurricane raging, right? You're outside trying to play basketball or something, or tennis, and there's a 200-mile-an-hour wind hurricane, it's not going to work. And so it was not possible to get to disclosure. However, other things were happening. In other words, the time was not totally wasted. And so for the next 3 years, almost 3 years, over 3 years, we made progress towards the goal. Now, wrapping up or getting to the finish line becomes possible with the election of 2020. Once we have an administration change, the political situation should settle down and become far more favorable to making a move like this, disclosure. Okay, good. And I felt that way, right? However, remember what I said about God laughing when you say make your plans? So the election was on November the 3rd, 2020. And I'm already thinking, okay, we're going to have a new administration. Things are going to settle down. What am I going to do? What's going to happen? I'm all excited. I had moved back to Washington. I had gotten an office. I got really lucky. I was able to get an office in the newly renovated National Press Building, 2 blocks from the White House. I'm a member of the National Press Club upstairs too. So, I mean, I had a perfect position, a physical position from which to start becoming much more active and effective as an activist on this issue. All good. But I didn't see Corona coming. Corona. Didn't see that coming. And I finally figured out it was coming I was back in California trying to raise money, and it looked promising when the pandemic became clear. This is late in January, and then I had some meetings in March, but the pandemic blew them up. I mean, nothing was going to happen. Most people were focusing on other things. They just weren't focusing on what I would have liked them to do. And I returned to Washington on March 22nd and bunkered in for what? I wasn't sure. And so since January of 2020, our pathway disclosure has been, or the time frame for disclosure has been delayed again by the worst pandemic in human history. Now, it may people say, no, it's not the worst pandemic in human history. Only 5 million have died. And I'm saying to you, if it wasn't for our technology, if we hadn't made enormous strides in epidemiology and biology and everything else, and we didn't have trillions or billions of dollars that if we really needed, we could have, this virus would have killed hundreds of millions of people. We got lucky. Right? Now, some people get that and some don't. That's fine. So this was a big deal. But there's more that I didn't see coming. Did I think that hundreds, actually thousands of people, with hundreds of them committing acts of violence, would overrun the capital of the United States? I did not see that coming. Did not see that coming. I don't know if it's ever happened in Brazil. I know it's happened in other countries. There have been countries when people have stormed the seat of authority there and overrun it, set it on fire. Right? I know it's happened, but I don't know if it's ever happened in Brazil. It's never happened here except during the War of 1812. I didn't see that coming. But then it gets worse, because I did not imagine that 2 years, not 2 years, I'm sorry, a year after the election, there would be major efforts within the United States, still ongoing, to overturn it or use its, quote, invalidity as a basis to establish a basis, rather, to win the next election by COVID and, well, untold means. I didn't expect that. In other words, I knew things were bad, and I've talked about that for years. I mean, I've talked about where things were headed and what if we didn't get our act together. And of course, part of that was ending the truth embargo. I mean, that's my issue. I'm a one-issue guy, but they're worse than I thought. It's that simple. Now, I don't want to complain too loudly, because I've been around. I've spoken and I've presented in 20-some countries, maybe 25 countries. I'm not unaware of the rest of the world. I'm not one of these people that can't find the Ukraine on a map. I know that what we're going through right now, other nations have gone through. Believe me, sometimes more than once. Worse than us. Okay, and so I'm sure they're looking at us going, well, hey, what? Now you know what it's like, guys. Okay, so I don't want to over-complain. However, in a lot of the nations that have gone through what we're going through right now, these nations didn't have nuclear weapons. They weren't the most powerful military on the planet. And they didn't have an economy as large as ours. So that if we go to hell, a lot more bad things are going to happen than many of these countries going to hell. Okay, Somalia is still a failed state. Is that really causing a huge amount of trouble around the world? No. The U.S. becomes a failed state, let me tell you, that will not go well. The consequences will be rather unpleasant. So what has happened is that what we have seen, and this is to the tremendous credit of the people that launched the To the Stars Academy, that made that maneuver. They did not give up. They did not disband, but rather they found a way to get some things done in spite of these other problems. And the way it's worked out is the To the Stars Academy was the first stage of the rocket, and it got things going. It launched the thing. It's now kind of stepped back. It's still there. There's still people on it. It still has, but there's been changes of personnel. And two of the key people have stepped out of the To the Stars Academy. That's like the second stage launch. And those two people are Chris Mellon and Luis Elizondo. These are the two key players. And they are pursuing the most important agenda involved in this effort. Right? The key agenda was not creating a public benefit company. The key agenda was not publishing some books, secret machines. The key agenda was not maybe doing some research down the line. I mean, that's all fine. It makes for a good mission statement. And if they'd raised a lot of money, they could have done a lot of those things. The key agenda of this whole maneuver was getting congressional hearings so we could end the truth embargo. And so what happened is that primarily Mellon and Elizondo started pursuing and doing things that would advance the truth embargo. advance the disclosure process. One of those things was doing a History Channel series called Unidentified, which kind of worked off of the New York Times material, took it further, brought in more witnesses, and exposed it to a lot of people. And that ran for, I think, 14 episodes. That was good. All right. Safe move, not a problem. And then they got even more serious. Mellon started taking meetings on the Hill. He started talking to and presenting witnesses to members of Congress, key committees of the United States Congress, and committee chairs. There are a few committees up there that are going to deal with this issue, and the rest are not. The Armed Services Committees, the Intel Committees, the Homeland Security Committees. There's a couple of subcommittees and so forth, and they're the ones who are going to deal with this issue. And so the ones you're going to talk to are those people. You're not going to talk to members that have no connection to any committee. And he was doing that. How many people he has briefed up there, we don't know, but we know it went on for 2 years. I think Elizondo may have participated in a couple of those briefings. They were off the record too, by the way. In other words, they weren't. There was no press release afterwards. The members did not come forward and say, "Here is what I was told." This was private. We knew about some of them. I mean, it wasn't completely sub rosa, but we knew that they were happening, but we don't know what it was. I mean, I sort of knew what it was, but I mean, the average person, the journalist, really didn't know. And all of that was preparation. So Mellon is preparing the Congress for what's coming next. What Elizondo was doing, I'm quite confident, unless he wants to correct me, is that he was continuing the work of, he was continuing what was happening post New York Times articles and what was happening during the Identified series, and that he was vetting witnesses. He was vetting witnesses that could testify before the Congress. What we learned was that the effect of the New York Times article and the launch of the TTSA and all the important people involved, and the Identified series, all of this sent a message to thousands of mostly retired members of our military or intelligence services, military intelligence complex, Army, Navy, Marines, DOD, even CIA, that speaking about this issue was a lot safer than it used to be. They were watching this go forward, and nothing was happening to these witnesses, Fravor, Day, and so forth. In fact, they were getting a lot of favorable press and being treated like heroes. So what does that mean? It means the bar to others coming forward was substantially lowered, which meant that some of them are going to come forward. I think the decision they made was logical. All right, it looks like I can now tell about what I experienced 30 years ago, 20 years ago, and so forth, as a pilot, as a crewman, as a whatever. But what do? What do I call my local television station and say, hey, I want to come down and tell you my story? Do I contact the DOD? Who do I contact about maybe having my story or be vetted? And you call Lou Elizondo, of course. He's all over the place. We know a lot of people got in touch with him. We know that. I have to assume that he vetted as many as possible. I happen to assume that if you're vetting witnesses that are coming out for the first time and you don't know exactly what you have, you do this sub rosa, you do this privately, right? And you determine whether they're going to be a good witness or not. You're gathering information about other stories. He could have easily been doing that for the last 3 years. And so what have you got now? You've prepared the Congress to hold hearings, and you're finding the witnesses and vetting the witnesses to testify. You've now established the basis for congressional hearings on this issue.
But Steve, where the Pentagon report fill it?
Sure. So all of that is taking place. All right. And so everybody over at the Pentagon, there are plenty of people at the Pentagon, they know all this. I mean, they're watching this. They know what's going on. They know what Mellon's doing. They know what Elizondo's doing. I mean, it may not be available to the press. Maybe the press is not paying attention. I think they are, and a lot of other people, but they know what's going on. They know what's coming. Okay, so they're already getting in a mindset as to, okay, we sort of see what's coming. How are we going to deal with it? Okay, so not surprisingly and appropriately, all of this work by these two gentlemen and the other members of the Two Stars Academy finally starts to have what we'll call real world consequence. I hope that my citizen hearing on disclosure may have helped a little here, but in any event, the first action by Congress of any substance in response to all these developments that start back in October and December of 2017. So we're talking about 3 years, about 3 years, is Marco Rubio. Now, he is the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which is considered like the premier committee in Congress. That committee has more gravitas, and the chairman and ranking member of that committee have got more gravitas than probably any other committee. And Rubio, to his great credit, makes the first move. And it's notable that Rubio had run for president and fully intends to run for president again. And what he did was he inserted in the comment section of the 2021 Defense Appropriations Bill, under the Intelligence Appropriation Bill Act, National Defense, come on, what is it? NDAA, the National Defense Appropriations Act, the intelligence section. Language related to the UAP, in other words, a reaction to all that had been happening, calling for a report from the DOD, providing, relating to various aspects of this and so forth, and including reports from other agencies, and put a time frame on it, 180 days from the signing of the bill. And he did this in July of 2020. So as of July 2020, anybody in the military intelligence complex paying attention, certainly the Department of Defense, knew that the chairman of the Intel Committee was going to ask for a report. So they knew in early 2020. Now, the bill did not get signed until December. And the time frame was 180 days from the signing of the bill, which put the formal date for delivering the report on June 25 of 2021. But what's more important to understand is the Department of Defense and the rest of the military intelligence complex had 1 year to decide and plan what to do when that report comes. It wasn't a surprise. I mean, it was going to be a surprise. They had plenty of time. So that was all set in motion. And because Rubio, I'm sure, by intention, asked for a classified and a public report, which they didn't have to ask for, and the Pentagon certainly didn't want to have to deliver, what he did was he set a date for a public report from the DOD on UAPs, June 25. Well, the journalistic community, journalism love nothing more than knowing the exact date when a very significant thing is going to happen. All right? It doesn't get any better than that. And so that coming report generated hundreds of articles about the UAP issue, many of them mentioning Marco Rubio in favorable terms. Win-win. Okay. So that kept the issue quite alive. Things kind of slowed down, though the odd member of Congress said something. You had a couple of people speak up during that period. And then the reports were delivered. Now, that was the public report was delivered on June 25. It was brief, not particularly profound, which I fully expected, because the Democrats, the Department of Defense does not want to be relating anything publicly about this issue to the public. That is not their job. That's the Congress's job and the president's job. But they were asked to deliver a report, so they put out 7 pages. They delivered a much larger classified report to, I think, 4 of the important committees in March, 3 months before the public report was released. So by the time their public report came out, the key members of Congress had already had the classified report in their hands for 90 days, including a briefing. In other words, they weren't just handed a bunch of paper. They were given a briefing. And they didn't talk about it. They didn't reveal the information. There was one possible leak that was very interesting that went through Richard Dolan, hasn't been corroborated, maybe never will be. But the point is, if it's true, it's very significant. And so that's important. So since March of 2021, what's that? That's almost 9 months ago. The members of two Senate and 2 House committees, at least, have been sitting on a substantial briefing about the UAP issue, of which we don't know the full details. All right, good. All right, so that was the first significant response by Congress to the ultimate agenda, the fundamental agenda of the To the Stars Academy, launched in 2017, and ultimately now the agenda is in the hands of Luis Elizondo and Christopher Mellon. So, not surprisingly, as we move later in the year, not much later in the year, it's time for the 2022 National Defense Appropriation Act. And not surprisingly, another member of Congress steps into the issue. And in this case, it's Ruben Gallego. House member Ruben Gallego puts language in the House version of the National Defense Appropriation Act for 2022, similar wording to what Rubio had put in for 2021, asking for a report, asking for this and that, and throwing some things in. And notably, asking that the UAP task force that was set up over in the boondocks with the Office of Naval Intelligence by the DoD as a catcher mitt to receive what Rubio was, the ball that Rubio was about to throw, that it be moved inside the Department of Defense where it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be out there in the boonies. I think they had a couple people in an office. It was nothing more than a placeholder. They moved it into the DoD. So that's significant. That got a lot of press. And then what happens next? Well, that's the House. Now the Senate needs to respond. So the National Appropriations also has a Senate version of the bill. And so a senator on the Intel Committee steps in, and that person is Senator Gillibrand. Now, what's interesting about that is that Senator Warner is the chairman, and Senator Warner, just like Chairman Rubio, could easily have just been the one that put that language in, but he chose to give it to Senator Gillibrand. And what's notable about that is Senator Gillibrand, like Rubio, ran for president back in 2016 and probably plans to run for president again. And so she was the one that puts the language in the Senate version of the bill. And so all of that is moving forward. Okay. So things are obviously definitely heating up. So now you have 2 bills in this year, 1 bill in the last year, the Senate, because it was only 1 bill last year because he put it in the comments. Rubio put that in the comments. It didn't need a House version. This time around, it's in the bill itself. So it's in both the House and Senate versions. They're going to have to be reconciled. And that's heading Now, here's where things get really interesting, okay? You're going to love this. So you got this language in the bill that says, okay, we need more reports. We need you to set up this and set up that. And you have 180 days to do this from the signing of the bill, like with Rubio in 2021. And what does that mean? That bill is going to get signed, 2020 rather. The bill this year is going to get signed probably soon, December, which would put that 180-day deadline into June of 2022. So that's essentially how long the Department of Defense has to respond to those requirements in the National Defense Appropriations Act. Now, I'm going to do a share here. So give me just a moment. This won't take long. Hang on a second. I'm going to bring up a site and I'm going to do a share. And I'm going to read something to your audience because I know some of them are just on audio. All right?
Right.
So let me bring this up. Hang on, just take a second. Let me see. Is that it? No, I'm going to go to Bookmark Manager. Got to go there. I could have brought this up sooner, but it's okay. Here we go. Disclosure process. Thank you. It is right here. Is this it? I think. No, this is not it. Hang on. Is that it? No, that's not it. There it is. What happens is that on November, and I'm going to do the share. Got to do the share. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to do share. Bingo. Share screen. Got it. Okay. Okay. Share screen. And now I'm going to do this. Is my shared screen up, Tiago? Do you see it?
Not yet.
Okay, hang on. Go back. So maybe I just need to go to window and Chrome tab. There we go. And I'm going to go to here. How about that?
Okay.
All right. So on November 33,
would be my last question, my man. You can read my mind.
Yeah. On November the 23rd, which is what, 7 days ago, the actual Department of Defense puts out a press release, which reads, DOD, Department of Defense, announces the establishment of the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group, AOI MSG. What I'm about to read you is a description of that, but let me point out what's happened here. Rather than wait until the deadline that's going to be in the act, the request from the House and Senate, which would give them to June to go ahead and do this, they just went ahead and did it 7 months ahead of the deadline. That tells you a great deal about where things are and where the Department of Defense is at. In other words, they're trying to get ahead of this issue. They're not waiting. They know how things are going. They know where this is going. So here's what it says. And this is government speak. This is military intelligence speak. But it is a formal press. And by the way, it's generated a lot of press, a lot of media today. But just the reason I'm going to read it to you is I want you to hear and see how formal this is getting, because it's getting real, folks. We're headed towards disclosure. Today, Defense Secretary, Deputy Secretary of Defense, Kathleen Hicks, in close collaboration with the Director of National Intelligence, that would be Haspel, directed the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security to establish within the office of the U.S. What is it? The USD is, no, I'm sorry, it's the United States, forgive me. I want to get this right. Hang on. The U.S. D I N S. Hang on. Right. Oh, the USD. Darn it. Oh, it's referring to the principal staff assistant and advisory to the Secretary of Defense and Deputy Secretary of Defense of Intelligence and Counterintelligence. All right, hang on. There's so many acronyms. Our country is built on acronyms. Okay, is the shared site up again? Are we seeing it? THIAGO?
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah, we
Okay.
can see it.
Okay. The office of the USD INS, the airborne, to establish within the office of the USD for intelligence and security, the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. This is one of the most ridiculous acronyms ever, but it's a biggie, and it's deliberate. It's intentional. As the successor to the U.S. Navy's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. So in other words, they're getting rid of the Unidentified Aerial Task Force, which was parked over at the Office of Naval Intelligence, and bringing the whole thing into the DoD and expanding it. The AOIMSG will synchronize efforts across the department and broader U.S. government. Now, in other words, they're basically saying this program now is going to be government broad, all aspects of government, to detect, identify, and attribute objects of interest in special use airspace, SUI. In other words, we're particularly interested in when these things turn up over special use airspace. I don't know, like Edwards aircraft carriers or nuclear facilities, of which, of course, we have evidence for all of that. And to assess and mitigate any associated threats to safety of flight or national security. Okay, that's not exactly a strong statement. It is appropriate. There's no reason to get worked up about that. To provide oversight of the AOIMSG, the Deputy Secretary also directed the Department of USD INS to lead an Airborne Object Identification and Management Executive Council, the AOIME exec, right, to be comprised of DoD intelligence community membership and to offer a venue for U.S. government interagency representation. Is there anybody that thinks that they're just setting up another Project Blue Book here? Meaning, okay, we're going to set a project to study the phenomenon. We'll get back to you. Because the whole thing was bogus. No. The answer to that is no. Okay, now, moving on down. The incursions by any airborne object into our special use airspace pose safety of flight and operations security concerns, and may, emphasize may, pose national security challenges. They're being very careful with this wording to not overemphasize the, quote, ET or extraterrestrial threat. DoD takes reports of incursions by any airborne object, identified or unidentified, very seriously and investigates each one. Yes, they do, and they have been doing that for the last 75 years. So don't think for 1 second they're just starting to do this because they've just set up this entity within the DoD because the Congress wants them to. This is the public face now of their investigation of this issue, which has been ongoing without let up for 75 years because the government has known, at least those that need to know, about the extraterrestrial presence since no later than 1947. It's something you need to remind yourself of frequently. This decision is the result of planning efforts and collaboration conducted by the Office of the USD and other DoD elements at the direction of Deputy Secretary Hicks. Underlined. They underline it to emphasize that this thing is being directed and oversaw by the highest levels in the DoD. To address the challenges associated with assessing UAP occurring on or near Department of Defense training ranges and installations, highlighted in the DNI preliminary assessment report submitted to Congress in June of 2021. That is a mistake. The DNI preliminary assessment report was delivered to Congress in March. The public report was done. So that's just a simple mistake. They make them. They're not perfect. The report also identified the need to make improvements in processes, policies, technologies, and training to improve our ability to understand UAP. Good for them. And finally, in coming weeks, the department will issue implementing guidance, which will contain further details on the AOIMSG director, organization structure, authorities, and resourcing. This press release, put out to the world and being covered worldwide, is a message from the Department of Defense that we get it, we know where this is going, we are on board with this, we know we're going to we're looking at a confirmation of the ET presence by the president. We know congressional hearings are coming, and we have put this together to show that we are cooperating. Now, does that mean they're going to tell us that, oh yeah, by the way, we've known there's ETs here since 1940? No, they're not going to do that. They're doing the appropriate thing that you would expect, but they cannot end the truth embargo. That is not their job. That can only be done by the president. And so this is a milestone press release and a message to all that things could be moving very rapidly very soon. And that is the last thing of significance that has happened in the disclosure process. That was 7 days ago. And I'm continuing to follow all the media. And I'm loading up the articles on my website as fast as I can. If your viewers go to paradigmresearchgroup.org and go to resources and then scroll down to print media archive, they can find the print media archive and they will see there in 2021 and 2020 1,500 articles related to these developments, all linked, and they can go read them if they want to. And they can literally see what the mainstream press is saying about it. Forget about the fringe press. Forget about the paranormal press. Forget about these small little operations. Go there and see what the mainstream English language press is saying about this, and you will see that the amount of coverage is massive. And so again, this is not 1969. There's not going to be a Project Blue Book that gets shut down. This is 2021, and we are closing in on congressional hearings and an end to the truth embargo, which is only being delayed by a fourth resurgence of the pandemic because we screwed up the first insurgence of the pandemic. The human race didn't handle it well. The leaders of nations didn't handle it well. And a whole lot of people are going to pay the ultimate price for that. In other words, government matters. For those of people who think we don't need government, let me tell you, it's times like these when you need competent government. Without government, the damn thing would have killed 500 million people. And research and whatever else. Whatever. Point is, this is a time government has to do its job. It didn't do it. So there you have the fourth resurgence, and then the political, how would you say, what's the word I'm looking for? The political upheaval in Michigan still is thick. It's still things happening on our Congress. Members of our Congress are threatening other members of our Congress. That is not something that happens here. It happens in other nations, but it doesn't happen. Anyway, the point is that is not helping. However, the pandemic is probably the bigger problem. Congressional hearings is the best thing on the ET issues, the best thing that could happen to Congress. It would do more to get Congress focused on doing real work in government and stop the nonsense, the stupidity that they're conducting than just about anything else. So I think the potential for congressional hearings early next year is good. And I would not be surprised. The next thing your viewers should be watching for, which will really tell them we're headed towards disclosure, will be when a committee chair of one of the four major committees, Intel and Armed Services, formally calls for hearings to begin. Exactly how much time they'll give can vary. They can call a hearing the next day, but they'll call for the hearings to begin and say that it's going to, that witnesses are going to be being assembled, and the hearings will start in such and such a date. When you hear that, then you know that we're really in the final weeks and months of the truth embargo.
That's great, Steve. Well, a lot of information, a lot of things to think about the future, about the present, and we hope that disclosure came fast and came bigger. Come fast and come bigger to all of us. And once again, thank you very much for your time. I will leave all the links of the website and Facebook on the description of the video, and then people can get in touch with you and know more about your work, because it's amazing. I
know that Brazil is going through trouble. I know it's having a very rough time, and I hope that it's able to get past it, and that the nation of Brazil and its wonderful people are going to be able to participate in the post-disclosure world that's coming and help to fix all that needs to be fixed, so that this century will be interesting, fun, and constructive, as opposed to what it's likely to be, which is hell on earth. All right, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, hell on earth, not good. All right, that's bad. But there's another path. Disclosure is the way to that path. So I look forward to visiting Brazil, possibly in 2022 again. We'll see how things go. Thanks, THIAGO. I'll be in touch.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my friend. É isso, pessoal. Espero que vocês tenham gostado dessa incrível entrevista com Steve, que trouxe muita informação para a gente sobre disclosure, né? Essa abertura ufológica. Steve Bassett é um ativista, como ele falou, do assunto ufológico, e conseguiu em 2013 fazer o que muita gente tentou, uma audiência pública no Congresso dos Estados Unidos. Então, espero que vocês tenham gostado. Vejam mais essa entrevista, mais de uma vez, porque tem muita informação importante. Então, se você gostou, dê um like no vídeo, deixe seus comentários, compartilhe o canal, para que dessa forma a gente possa levar para mais pessoas muito mais informação. Ufologia séria, honesta e de qualidade você só encontra aqui neste canal, além de entrevistas inéditas e exclusivas. É isso, pessoal. Um abraço a todos e até a próxima.